Good afternoon, Huskies, and welcome to another season of our UConn Alumni Relations Career Webinars. My name is Joshua Prue, a proud Husky graduate and the Director of Alumni Engagement for Chapters and Alumni Networks here at UConn, and I'll be your moderator today. On behalf of the UConn Office of Alumni Relations, I'd like to welcome you to our opening webinar of the season, featuring author, speaker, and career coach David Fisher of Rockstar Consulting. Today's webinar, entitled Networking in the 21st Century, is designed at providing a greater understanding of personal branding, developing a networking plan, and integrating technology into your networking life, among others. Before we begin, we have a few areas of note. First, there will be an opportunity to ask questions at the end of the presentation by typing them into the question box in your control panel. Feel free to type them in as you think of them, and we will get to as many questions as we can at the end of the session. Number two, a survey will be sent to you as a follow-up. We'd appreciate it if you would fill out the survey so that we can continue to bring you the types of webinars that you're looking for to enhance your careers. Number three, this webinar will be recorded. Please visit our YouTube page at youtube.com/UConnAlumni sometime this week to view the recording. And lastly, be sure to check out our event calendar for upcoming webinars and events in your area at UConnAlumni.com/events. Now, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our presenter today. Kindly known as D Fish to everyone except his mother, David Fisher's passion for growth and development has allowed him to influence thousands of others during his professional career. Today, as a coach, speaker, author, and president of Rockstar Consulting, he continues to create a powerful impact on individuals and organizations as he works to help them become rock stars. David's background combines entrepreneurial sales experience with strategic and academic training. While getting his degree at Northwestern University, he worked for Cutco Cutlery, quickly becoming one of the top sales representatives in the country. After graduating, he ran the Chicago office for Cutco and Vector, training over 1,500 salespeople, and then went to sales management for Brinks Security. It was these experiences that gave him the true foundation to start Rockstar Consulting. As a coach, David works with professionals to help improve their performance and peace of mind. He focuses on combining tangible business tools with intangible communication and leadership skills that differentiate top performers from the rest. As a speaker, he combines his business experience with his performance background to communicate relevant and powerful information in an easy and accessible manner. A recognized expert in professional networking and entrepreneurship, he has contributed material to career.com, firmology.com, and thedigitalfa.com. He has written extensively on both online and offline relationship building and business development, and he's the current author of several books, including Networking in the 21st Century, Why Your Network Sucks and What to Do About It, Networking in the 21st Century, On LinkedIn, Why Your Network Sucks and What to Do About It, which is also known as D Fish's Guide to 21st Century Networking, and Networking in the 21st Century for Millennials. You will receive a follow-up email at the conclusion of this presentation with David's website, as well as additional information pertaining to his books and more resources. And without further ado, it's my pleasure to introduce David Fisher.
Thanks, Josh. I swear that I do these webinars just to hear people say nice things about me. So thanks for that great intro. And hello, everyone. I hope that wherever you are having a fantastic day. I am sitting here in Chicago, Illinois, and we've got a beautiful sunny afternoon. There's probably not a lot of them left for us, so we're going to take them when we can. And excited to spend some time with everyone talking about professional networking. And I know that some of you probably came to the session today looking for some hope. Some of you probably are really excited about networking. Some of you are probably not as excited about networking, but looking to maybe make a change. And I think we've got some great stuff for you today. I do want to piggyback on what Josh said. We are going to have time for questions today and hopefully a few answers as well. So feel free to use that chat box at any time so that Josh can grab those and we'll have a chance to answer those questions for you. But because we don't have a lot of time, let's dive in. Let's talk about networking. And the one thing I want to make sure is clear about what we're trying to accomplish. I'm not here to give you the magic pill, right? I've been talking to people, coaching, speaking on this for years, and I know that a lot of times we wish there's just that one thing that if we do it differently, all of our networking problems will go away, we'll have this huge network, tons of opportunities. That's really just not how it works, right? So we're not really here to talk about that one secret, that one magic trick that all the online articles want to promise us, but rather to look at some basic skills and tactics that you can use to be more effective building relationships with others. And to that, we're also going to look at some of the strategies behind it and also some of the challenges. I really think that there are some reasons why most of us struggle in our networking. And I think it's really important to understand that before we move forward, because it gives us a way to work around those challenges. But I think one of the biggest challenges we have when we're networking and when we're even just thinking about it is that we have an incorrect concept, right? We're working from a framework that's, I think, outdated and wrong. Most of us think about this very old school idea of networking, which is a bunch of people standing in a room. Usually there's some bad appetizers and we're just passing business cards. I actually love using this stock footage here because I know that it's been around a long time, and some of you probably have seen this photo before, and it's stale and it doesn't make us excited. That's kind of the feeling that networking engenders in most of us. And I want to move past that, because this is absolutely not what good networking is. It's not a transaction. It's not passing a business card. It's not just getting somebody to connect with you on LinkedIn or Twitter. There's much more depth. True networking is really about relationships, and that's what we want to talk about today, is how do we develop the right kind of relationships that are going to help you in your career. And I know that we have a lot of different people on the call today. Some of you just out of school, maybe looking to get that first career. Some of you are career changers or are looking for your next position. Some of you, might be in sales. You might have your own company. You'd be an entrepreneur. There's all sorts of goals on the call today. But no matter what you're trying to do, relationships can help. And of course, things have gotten even more confusing, because how do we start relationships when we're not only going to events and meeting person in the quote-unquote real world, but what happens when we're now throwing in things like social media, when we're throwing in LinkedIn, Facebook, Twitter, when we're throwing in texting, and the fact that we can now all walk around with the collected knowledge of the world in our pockets, on a quick Google search. They used to say that it's not what you know, it's who you know. And they used to say it disparagingly, right? It was about nepotism and favoritism. But these days, who you know is actually a really important thing, because we all have access to that knowledge I mentioned before and that connectivity. It's omnipresent. So really, our ability to have access to resources, to leverage the knowledge we have, is going to be a key indicator in our success. So I want to talk about my definition of networking. And by the way, this isn't the only definition of networking, but it's the one that I use in the book. And I think it covers most of the bases. So that's how we're going to approach it today. And for me, networking is building a web of relationships with others for mutual support in finding business solutions. All right, so that's a nice little pithy way of saying it, but let's unpack that, because there's a few key ideas that I really want you to be able to take away from our session today. And even if you don't remember anything else, remember this basic framework. I think it's really going to help. And there's 4 keys here. The first is that it is a web of relationships. People always ask, how many people should be in my network? What's the right size for my network? And you'll find that there's not really a right answer for that. It really depends on your approach to networking, what you're trying to accomplish, what your personality is. But I think we'd all agree that it's more than 2, right? So we have to look at ways to bring more people into our network. The second thing is that it's about relationships, and relationships take time. Again, this is not a transactional process. This is a relational process. And if you're not in here for the long haul, you're going to struggle a little bit. And I think a big component, if we see these 2 pictures on the bottom of your screen here, a big component is what I call reciprocity or mutuality. We really want to make sure that not only are we helping others, but we are looking for help ourselves. So the first thing we have to do is look for ways that we can offer something to our network and the people that we're connected to, whether that is through just shared conversation, whether that's through help, whether it's through introductions, feedback, actual business. But we want to make sure that before we ask for something, we give first, right? We all can see the person who's just going to try to ask us for something right away. We can see them a mile away. And in fact, that's why I think a lot of us get turned off. We go to a reunion or an alumni event or a Chamber of Commerce event, and we meet that person who within 2 minutes is asking us for something without having established that relationship. And we don't want to be that person, of course, so a lot of times we shy away from it. But one of the ways that you avoid doing that is by giving first. And then I think the last part is also going to your network and asking for help. And it's okay to ask for help. In fact, as long as you've established the relationship, asking your network to support you is a key part of that reciprocity, right? Because it has to go both ways. So these are the 4 steps or parts of the networking process as far as I'm concerned. And that's, again, how we're going to approach it today. A lot of other definitions, but these ones are the ones that I think work. And what does your network have? Why is this worth spending a few minutes on out of our day? Again, I've been training people and talking to people about networking for years. And it's funny because people always say to me, oh, networking, yeah, you know, I probably should do that better. I don't do a very good job, or, whew, you know, my network's not too good right now. But why do we even worry about this in the first place? It's because I think we all intuitively understand that the resources, the help, the support we need in our career are out there. You know, if you think about even how we get things done in our personal lives, you know, do things like finding friends or finding significant others, it's through the people we know. So it's worth spending some time developing the networking skills because it gives you the opportunity to be more successful. Even if you don't know what that looks like right now, I always say to people, all of the help you need is out there in your network somewhere. It's a matter of identifying it. It's a matter of connecting with the right people and asking for that help. So let's talk really quickly about why our network isn't very good. I don't want to spend too much time on this because I'd rather talk about the cool things we can do to make sure our network is better. But the reality is we evolved as human beings in an environment that was very different than the one we're in right now. And we really spent most of our time in very small groups of people, right, where we would know the people in our tribe or our clan or our family, and that was about it. Right? We'd know a very small number of people, and we'd have very, very strong relationships with them. And a lot of what we developed as far as skills and attributes and traits are really about developing strong relationships, right? It's about developing trust and intimacy and reliability and developing social cues. There's a lot about language and facial expressions and body language that's all about creating these strong relationships with a core group of people. But we don't live in that world anymore, right? It's much different. And so the challenge is, again, we don't have a lot of success building big networks because we're not wired for it. In fact, the number 148 is important. This is a number, it's called Dunbar's number. And Robin Dunbar was an anthropologist who did some research. And he found that the average person can maintain 148 relationships at any given time. That may seem like a lot, but it really isn't. And by the way, when he was talking about relationships, what he meant is that you had a strong enough connection and interaction with them that you could, walk into a room and have a conversation with them wherever you met. If you ran if you ran into them at a restaurant, you could have a conversation with them and it'd be very comfortable. So that sounds great. And you're like, wow, 150 people, right? That's more than enough people for me to develop, a good network. Well, there's a problem. And the problem is that a lot of other research shows that most of the opportunities that we get through networking, we don't get through these people that we know well. In fact, there's another study. This is one of the most cited sociology papers ever. It's called The Strength of Weak Ties. It was written by a guy named Mark Granovetter. And what Mark Granovetter found out is that most of the time when we find work, when we find a job, we find it through people that we know. Now, most of the people on the call right now are nodding their heads going, yeah, duh, of course. But, and this was a really important distinction, he found that most people find work through people that they don't know well. what he called a weak connection. Some of you saw less than once a week, but more than once a year. And that's obviously quite a wide gamut there. And the reason why he found that this happened is because the strength of our relationship is not what actually drove networking success. It was actually the access to opportunities. So if you think about it, the people that you know really well, they know the same stuff that you do because they live in the same world. They, are exposed to the same information. It's the people that you only see every once in a while that are exposed to different information. I say that they live in different pools of knowledge, right? They have exposure to different ideas, to different job opportunities. They have access to other information. Think about it. It's much more powerful to meet somebody, let's say at an alumni event, right? You're going to an alumni networking event. This is a person that you've got a connection with in some ways, but you don't see them that often. And so when you go and see them, they're like, hey, at my job, I heard about this opening that might be perfect for you. That is how most opportunities come through our network. Now, you might be seeing that there's a bit of a problem. There's a tension, a conflict. The more of these weak connections that we have available to us, the more opportunities we might have. But we're not good at managing them. We're only good at managing 148, 150 relationships. So there's this tension, there's this teeter-totter, and that's why most of us, I think, hate networking, because we've tried to network in the past and we tried to develop new relationships, but we bumped into that upper limit of 148. And so we were putting this energy and this effort in, and it was really exhausting, and we said, okay, just screw this, right? I can't do it anymore. I'm not even getting the opportunities I want. Networking just doesn't work. Or even worse, we think I'm just not a good networker. It's all me. So we have to look at ways to get past that. And I want to talk about 4 ways that you can get past this, what I think are 4 strategies for success that I talk about in the book. But the one thing I want to make sure is very clear before we jump into these strategies. There is a certain type of person that is good at networking, all right? And it's the person who's looking back at you in the mirror, right? Whatever sort of personality you have, I think you can be a successful networker. And the reason I bring this up right now is I mentioned there's a structural challenge we have to developing an effective network. And most of us, however, don't think to ourselves, well, gosh, there's these, structural challenges, I can only maintain so many relationships, but, weak connections are what's important, and so that's the problem I've had. Of course we don't think that. We just think, oh, you know what, I'm shy, or, oh, I'm not organized enough, or, oh, I just don't manage my time well enough. I'm just not cut out to be a good networker. I don't have the personality. I'm not the gregarious, life of the party type of person that knows everyone. I want to be very clear that everybody can be a good networker. That doesn't mean everybody's going to approach it the same way. In fact, I think it's important that you really work to your strengths. But we can all be successful. That very gregarious person who's great at meeting new people might not be the best at follow-up. Right, I grew up in the sales world. I was a salesperson. I knew a lot of salespeople, a lot of entrepreneurs. These are the type of people that are really, really good at, you put them in a room full of strangers, they'll make friends. I've also noticed that a lot of them aren't great at detail and aren't great at follow-up, so that's their challenge. I also have friends and clients, people that I know who you would not look at them and go, wow, they're a master networker, because they're kind of quiet, they're kind of shy, a little more retiring, but they're fantastic one-on-one, and they have great follow-up systems, and they really do a good job of engaging with people and listening and really building that relationship. And they have powerful, powerful networks, right? So you can't tell. And again, wherever you're at, whatever type of personality you think you have, it's the right one for networking. So I want to make sure that's clear. So let's talk about 4 different strategies that will help you be successful in networking. And these are high-level strategies. We're going to talk about a few tactics at the end today, but I think these are 4 areas that will not only help you build a network, but will actually help you be a better networker long term. And the 4 ideas I'm going to share with you, one is to become an autodidact. The second is to become socially savvy. The third is to make technology your friend. All right, and the fourth is to live a pro-personal life, and that's not a typo, pro-personal life, and we'll talk about how that's going to help you be a successful networker. Now, the first thing you got to do is become an autodidact, and I love talking with alumni groups from really prestigious universities because I can use big words and nobody's scared. Autodidact, just a very simple way of saying self-taught, right? It's a good SAT word. But the challenge is the educational system that most of us came up in was a 20th century system. I would actually argue it was a 19th century system, which really isn't designed to help us be successful in today's environment. If you think about networking and even just the business environment we're in today, what are things that are important? Collaboration, information exchange, communication, the ability to interact with others and build consensus and influence. That's not what we were taught growing up. We sat in lines of desks and just listened to the teacher. In fact, if you were talking to your friend, if you were quote unquote collaborating, you got in trouble, right? So this is not helping us be successful in the long term. And there was no networking 101, business communication 101. We didn't get it in grade school, high school, very rarely universities. I have yet to see a college that has networking 101. Grad school even, like, MBAs. I've met really successful MBAs who have never had basic communication courses. So we can't rely on our formal education. We have to take ownership ourselves. And this is compounded by the fact, by the way, that our employers, the companies we work for, are also not going to invest in us to a large degree, and it's not their fault either. Like, what are they going to do? They got a paradox. They can invest in their people who could possibly leave, right, and take all that investment with them, or they could not invest in their people and just deal with whatever skills their employees have, right? As you know, with large organizations, status quo is usually the way they go, and so that's why they don't invest in their people. So you have to do it yourself. And the fact that you're on this call right now says a lot about you, that you understand that, so I'm sort of preaching to the choir. But continue to invest in yourself, whether it's reading books, seminars, and webinars. I love YouTube, or get a podcast. There's just so many opportunities that technology has really opened up for us. You have to take advantage of those. Now, there's a lot of things to learn about networking, but people often ask, what's the best way of developing my networking skills? Where should I put my education and my learning focus? I think the first place to start is actually in what I call social savvy, or another way of saying this is basic social skills. Now, here's what's interesting about this. Most of us think, in fact, all of us think, we have good communication skills. And the reason why is because we've all been communicating with others our entire lives. Right? We do not live in caves or under rocks. We all have some sort of social interaction on a daily basis. I had a chance early in my career to interview people. I was a recruiter. I interviewed over 10,000 people. And one of the questions I would always ask is, on a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate your people skills? Or how would you rate your communication skills? And it was very funny because, people would always be like 9, 10. Every once in a while somebody would say 11. And I'd be like, okay, great, you've got a lot of confidence, but you don't listen very well. But what I really realized is we all think we have these good skills. At the same time, we all have these huge areas of opportunity. So it's really about developing some self-awareness about where we can improve. And in the book, I go through a lot of different areas that you can look at. They range from things like basic body language skills, presentation, like how do you carry yourself? It could be as simple as how you dress. Do you have a good sense of humor? How are you at listening? There's a lot of these basic foundational skills, and you might ask yourself, well, why are these important? Understand that networking, at its foundation, if it's relational, if it's about those relationships, it's about us interacting with a human being. Every work or professional relationship starts as a relationship between two people. And again, all of those very basic interaction skills are going to be so helpful. It doesn't matter if you know the all of the best quote-unquote networking tricks. If people think you're a jerk, right, it's not going to help. So sometimes it's just a matter of looking in the mirror and going, okay, well, what am I doing well? And hey, let's be honest, what are the areas of opportunity for me? And starting to work on those areas. And this leads to a little detour. I actually have in the book a half chapter. I'm pretty proud. I think I'm one of the only authors to ever write a half chapter. But there's a quick detour I want to make here when talking about social savvy. And it's simply this: if you want to be a successful networker, really look at who you are as a person, because I do believe that personal development has to precede professional development. You're only going to be as good a professional as you are a person. You're only going to be as good a networker as you are a person. Again, a lot of times people are trying to put all of these, elevator speeches and follow programs and all these tips and tricks, of the trade on top of who they are. But I'll tell you what, if you're a good person, and good, I just mean compassionate and caring, honest, loyal, helpful, however you want to define that, you will attract people that want to help you, right? And of course, if you're trying to help them, there's that great reciprocity happening. But I think a parallel process to learning networking skills is also going, hey, how can I develop as a person? And hey, there's lots of world religions and self-help sections in the bookstore and philosophies on this, and you can be on your own path, but I do think it's worth mentioning that, hey, if you're going to be a jerk, you're not going to be a successful networker. So just, don't be a jerk, okay? All right, so let's go back to our 4 strategies. The third one is to find a technology balance. Now, a lot of people think when they read the title of the book that it's all about using technology, right? Networking in the 21st century must all be about social media. Not at all, right? But technology does play an important role. And I think one of the main reasons it does play an important role is that it helps us move past that tension, right? When I mentioned earlier, we can only maintain 150 relationships, but our weak network is where the opportunities are. How do we find a way to balance that without spending hours and hours and hours of every day trying to build relationships? I think technology is giving us some solutions for this. And the reason I say balance to your technology is that I don't think you need to dive in and spend all of your time on social media and all your time texting. I don't think we're going to become pod people out of the matrix anytime soon, okay? Or at least I hope not. But it does give us some very powerful tools. And I don't think that there is a one-size-fits-all way to use technology. But it's really about looking at what you're trying to accomplish right now, right? What you feel comfortable with, where your comfort level is and your confidence level is with technology, and plugging it in. Whether it's using tools like LinkedIn or Twitter or Facebook to connect, whether it's using text, whether it's developing a website, whatever it might be, there's all these really powerful tools. And again, I'm not going to suggest that all of these are appropriate for everyone on the call, but it's about being open to it and going, okay, well, maybe I need to have a better presence with my network online. Maybe I need a place where they can go and find out information about me. So in that case, hey, maybe the LinkedIn profile is good. Or maybe it's I want to build my network. I want to have more people in, especially maybe more people who aren't geographically located but are in my industry. Well, then something like Twitter might help. Or maybe you have your own company or you're in sales. Or maybe you just want to make sure your network knows what's going on. It's about sending an e-newsletter once a month or even just once a quarter saying, hey, here's what's going on with me. There's a lot of ways of approaching it. And again, my point here is just pick a few of these tools that you feel comfortable with and and use them. Use them on a regular basis. And if you're not comfortable with any of these technology tools, well, great. Go back to that idea of being an autodidact. Pick one, jump online, go to YouTube, go find some training videos, and start to get comfortable with at least one or two of these platforms. And then the fourth I'm going to share with you is the idea of sharing a network that's pro-personal. Now, professional, of course, is a combination of the words personal and professional. And what's interesting about developing a professional, network is that it's something we've actually always done. But what happened in the second half of the 20th century, especially, is we started to create these mental divisions in our mind. And it became very common for people to go, well, these are my work relationships, these are my personal relationships, these are the people that I go play basketball with on the weekends, these are the people from my church, these are the people from my synagogue, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And we create these mental divisions because human beings love to categorize. But the world has never been that clear cut. In fact, there's always been some bleed over, right? We would help our brother-in-law get a job at our office, or we'd have a long-term client who became a friend. What I'm suggesting here is that we actually take that professional approach and we focus on it, we embrace it, because a lot of the opportunities that you'll find through your network are where you really kind of start to put the different aspects of your life together. I use this picture because it's a fun picture. These are some people that I really like. They're fantastic. And I would ask you, is this a personal picture or a professional picture? Now, the fact that we're wearing lanyards that say staff might be a key here, but this is actually a group that I was working with at a startup firm doing some consulting, and we are at a conference in Las Vegas for LinkedIn, and this is the after conference party, and of course it's in Las Vegas, so they had to make it like a club. It was a lot of fun. But again, is this a personal picture? Well, hey, we're having fun, we're having a good time. These are people, I would call them friends of mine. Is it a professional? Yeah, we're at a conference, right? So what I'm going to suggest to you is just to be open to the places where you can start to combine your worlds. And it's also about bringing more of the authentic you to every situation, whether it's a quote-unquote personal situation or a professional situation. I really think our relationships are professional. The way we interact in these relationships is based on the context that we're in, and is either personal or professional. So I mentioned brother-in-laws. I have a brother-in-law. He's a very successful real estate agent. I've actually done work and been brought in to speak to his organization. Of course, when we're there, we're not talking about Thanksgiving, right? We're talking about business stuff. And conversely, when we have Thanksgiving dinner, we're not talking about business, usually, right? But the context actually drives the type of conversation we have. So look for the different ways that you can bring, again, all the different parts of your world together, and you'll find a lot of opportunities really start to pop out. So those are the 4 strategies that I cover in the book. So the 4 strategies, again: become an autodidact, develop your social savvy, find a technology balance, and live a professional life. What I want to do in the time that we have left, all right, is then drill down. Go, okay, so how do we take all of these different strategies and actually execute them tactically? How do we, as Mr. Miyagi said, how do we wax on, wax off? How do we paint the fence? Because we can think about this strategically all we want, but it's really about being out there where the rubber meets the road, right? When you're trying to build these relationships, when you're trying to give help to your network, when you're trying to get help from your network, how do you do that? So let's look at a couple tactics. Now, I think there's about 28 or 30 tactics in the book. I obviously don't have time to go through all of them. We have to just zoom through them. So I'm just going to cover a few of them in depth. And if you like it, of course, I will not be upset if you want to go get the book on Amazon. That'd be totally cool. But I also want to remind everybody that please ask any questions you have as we're going through these tactics so that I can answer them at the end. And in fact, I'm going to pause for a second and just, Josh, you might be on mute, but do we have any questions yet, or should we just keep going?
Feel free to keep going. We are actually sitting on 0 questions at the moment. So folks, definitely take an opportunity, jump in there, write some questions down, and we'll take care of those.
Perfect. Because, or maybe there's no questions because I'm just being so clear.
I think that's it. I think that's it.
In my mind, that's what it is, but probably not. There's probably a lot of gray area here. So again, feel free to throw out those questions to me. Okay, so let's start looking at this tactically. Now, the first place I think we really need to start when we're building our network, and this is no matter where you're at, whether you're just starting out in your career, you're a veteran, whatever you're trying to accomplish, is to develop a networking plan. And when I say that, I often see, and I am running an in-person session, I often see a few people's eyes glaze over. And the reason why is because we think of a networking plan and we all of a sudden go, oh my gosh, there's spreadsheets, and we have to have this huge binder, and oh my goodness, this is really overwhelming. And when we think that way, we just don't even want to dive in at all. When I say networking plan, I really want to talk about creating a structure around your activity that informs your activity, that helps you decide what to do, but is simple enough that you'll actually do it. So I think a networking plan, by the way, can be just jotted down on the back of a napkin when you have a few extra minutes, or maybe you're on a commute, you pull out your cell phone or a tablet and you can just type a few notes. Keep it easy, because if it's easy, you'll actually have an opportunity to do it. There's a few things to look at here. The first is to really be clear about what your goals are and what the goals that you're looking to support through networking, what they are. I find that most professionals don't have a very clear view of what they're trying to accomplish. You ask them, hey, what are you trying to do? They say, find a new job. Okay, well, what kind of job? Where do you want to work? What type of position? And they go, anything. All right, that's a bit of a struggle. Or, I'm trying to get more clients. Well, how many clients? What type of clients? I don't know, just more. And they struggle. The more clarity you have, the more successful you'll be. As the Cheshire Cat said in Alice in Wonderland, if you don't know where you're going, then any road will get you there, right? So even just saying, hey, I want to find a position in this industry at this level doing this kind of work, or I want to bring 5 more clients in for my to my company, whatever it might be, being able to write a 2 or 3 sentence goal is incredibly powerful. And not just write this down, just don't keep it in your mind, write it down. There's a level of clarity that you need when you actually start writing things. So the second thing I would suggest for your networking plan is then go, okay, if this is my goal, who do I need to know that will help me get that accomplished? If you can think of specific people, fantastic, and jot those names down, right? Maybe they're people that you do know, but you don't have much of a connection with them and you need a stronger one. Maybe you don't know them yet. Or even just think of kind of demographics, like who's the target audience? So if you said, well, gosh, I'm in sales and I would like to have more clients, and most of my clients are attorneys. And so you could think to yourself, well, okay, my network needs to have more attorneys in it. But you could also step back and go, well, who knows attorneys? Who are people that would be connected to attorneys? And it might be CPAs or financial planners or people who are professors at a law school, right? I mean, you can start to think about all the different connections that might be involved there. The third step then is to go, where are these people? And I say to think like an advertising executive. When they're advertising trucks and beer, they don't put it in cartoons, right? They put it on NFL football. And conversely, if you're watching NFL football, you don't see diaper commercials, right? Because it's the wrong audience. So think about, where is the audience that I want to communicate with, that I want to connect with? I always joke, if you're going to be selling yachts, well, then you probably want to go hang out at the country club, because that's where those people are. And this is what I mean about using your networking plan to inform your activity. I run into so many professionals who spend their time networking, and they actually put a lot of effort in, but for example, they'll spend all of their time talking to the wrong people, hanging out with the wrong people in the wrong environments. Again, go where your target audience is, where the people you want to meet are. That's what's really important. If you were, in a position where you wanted to get to know more entrepreneurs and tech startup people, go find the incubator for tech startups in your city. Every city has one now. Here in Chicago, it's 1871. That's the name of it. I would go there and hang out there every day. I think you get my point with that, but you got to have a plan of attack. The second thing, which is really important, I think this is critical for networking, and I think this is actually really important for just being a professional these days. It's to build a personal brand and to plant a flag. And when I say personal brand, I know, and I can't see you because we're on a webinar, but I know some of you rolled your eyes when I said that, because personal branding is this buzzword right now, and everybody like bandies it about trying to sound cool and hip. But I think it's actually a really important concept, and this is what it means to me. We live in an incredibly noisy world, right? This is the first time ever that we've had an environment in the history of the world that we're like we do now, where you think about how much information is out there. Think about how many messages get blasted at you every day, whether it's advertising or reading articles. I mean, the fact that it used to be 30, 40 years ago only that, how many television stations did you have? 3, 4 maybe? You'd have a couple newspapers in your town, and by couple I mean 2, right? There was only so much information that you could take in every day. Now I can go to Huffington Post or Forbes and just have article after article. I can go on LinkedIn. I can social media. We're blasted by information. Now I mention that because think about your network and flip this. Think about what they're being exposed to. Tons of information. So you have to be able to quote unquote stand out in their mind. And for me, this is really about planting a flag and giving them something very simple and very clear that they can kind of hook onto and know about you. So when you're going out and working with your network, it's important to be able to very clearly define what you're about. What do you do? Who do you help? How do you fit in? So for example, if you're a job seeker, and it's interesting to me how often this happens, and it's a little sad. I meet somebody who's looking for a job, and I go, okay, well, what do you want to do? What kind of position you're looking for? What are the skills you bring? What's the special sauce that an employer would want to hire you for? And people struggle to answer that. And I go, well, I think to myself, well, of course you're struggling for a job. I can't remember what you do, right? And the way to think about this is you want to make it really easy for your network to know what you're about, so that when they do find an opportunity for you, they can connect it back to you very simply. So there's a lot of ways of looking at what your niche is, what your brand is. And a brand, of course, is just how people view you when they think about you. But there's a lot of ways of constructing that. There's some ideas in the book about it, but there's tons of articles and other books all about personal branding, and spend a little time figuring that out, because it's going to save you a lot of headache and effort down the line. You want people to know what you're about, and this is where the dreaded elevator speech comes in. And I do have an outline for a possible elevator speech in the book. You can definitely go check it out. The biggest thing I always tell people about elevator speeches, because this is, of course, what people always ask me about, right? What's the right way of doing an elevator speech or an introduction? I got to introduce myself to people. How do you do it? What's the trick? There is no trick, but what is important is that you keep it short, you keep it sweet, and you keep it simple, right? You let people listen to your introduction, right? Especially if it's the first time they've met you, or maybe it's the second or third, or maybe they've met you a number of times. But if you don't make it easy for them to grab onto, it's going to get lost in all of the other noise that's out there, right? So we got to make this simple. Okay, so I'm going to skip ahead. So obviously, some of the foundational tactics are these ideas of creating a plan, having a clear niche. I think it's really important. Being able to introduce yourself to others, right? So there's obviously a lot of different ways we can build relationships, but one thing I want to talk about is the idea of follow-up. And the picture you're seeing on the screen right now, I think one of the important ways of follow-up is to use technology. I think this is where technology makes our lives so much easier. but you have to have a follow-up system. If we look at networking as a transactional process, then we don't need follow-up. We just do it once. We hope something happens. Um, but if we really look at it as a relational process, we need a way to maintain contact with people over time. And we need a way to do it without having to actually reach out and call people over and over. Think about it. If you wanted to add, let's say, 50 more people to your network, and 50 people above that idea of 150, kind of innate relationships that we have, and you want to, talk to each of those 50 people just, twice a year, maybe 3 times a year, right? You're adding a conversation every other day, right? That could be exhausting. So technology is really important. There's a couple places where I think this can help. The first thing I'm going to suggest to everybody, and this is such a powerful tool, and almost nobody does it. I've been talking about networking for 10 years, so I can count on probably 2 hands the number of times people have actually done this to me, and it's so effective. Email a short note after you meet someone saying, hey, you know what, it was nice to meet you. And you can even put a template, which is, I'll let you behind the curtain. I have a template that I use. I've saved in my Outlook that when I meet somebody at an event or at a conference or at a speaking engagement I just, change the details. Hey, it was nice to meet you at this event. If I can be of service, please let me know. It's just a short little note, but that's another touch that I put out there. It's something very few people do, so I stand out, and it's another opportunity for me to kind of just plant a little seed in their minds. If you have a chance to write a personal note, this is something that I remember reading about Bill Clinton once, early in my career. And whether or not you like Bill Clinton's politics, he was president of the United States. You got to be a pretty good politician to get to that level. And one of the things he's famous for is writing notes to people. And so I remember reading that early on. And I was like, I can try doing that. And to this day, I kind of continue to try to write notes. And it's really powerful. I have horrible handwriting. You can ask my fiance. She still laughs. She doesn't think people can even read the notes I send. But you know what? I spend a moment or two. I actually show some care and some attention. And wow, people respond to that so positively. But also using social media here. This is really where I think social media shines. And whether it's Twitter, LinkedIn, Facebook, whatever platform you want to use. I obviously am a little biased towards LinkedIn. I speak on LinkedIn all the time. I've got a book on it, so obviously I admit I'm biased. But I think for most professionals, it is really a great professional space where we've all agreed to connect digitally and talk about professional topics. But if you think about the idea of your network and having this group of people who you'd like to communicate with, but you don't have a lot of time, when you can participate in a group and post a discussion or post a status update or use the new LinkedIn publisher to post an article, it's amazingly powerful. You can spend 2 minutes, 3 minutes, maybe 4 minutes, and send a message that goes out to your entire network. And of course, not all of them are going to see it. And it's not going to be relevant to all of them, and that's okay, but it allows you to stay top of mind with them. And that's really what's powerful. And by the way, if you don't think top of mind, quote-unquote, advertising is important, think about companies like Coca-Cola and McDonald's that spend millions of dollars a year on advertising on a product that we all know about. None of us are like, I wonder what McDonald's sells. Must be a new Scottish restaurant. Of course not. But McDonald's wants to make sure that when we get hungry, the first thing we think is McDonald's. In the same way, we want to make sure that when our network does think about our industry, our field, our niche, right? This is why that planting that flag is so important. We want to make sure that when they think about us, they go, oh yeah, Bill, I know Bill does this stuff. Or, hey, I remember Susan talking about a project she did that's this similar. Maybe I'll reach out. I always use the example, for those of you who've ever seen the show How I Met Your Mother. And if you haven't, that's okay, but there's a character named Barney. And Barney, played by Neil Patrick Harris, one of the things he's famous for is that he has a guy he has a guy, for suits and for tickets, oh, I got a guy for that. I'm going to suggest to you that you want to be the guy or the gal that your network thinks about when they think about what you do. And a lot of this is going to come through that social media use, through posting status updates, keeping people in the loop. And what you do is you're keeping your network, your relationships, just at kind of a little bit of a simmer. They're just kind of warm relationships. And then whenever it's appropriate to kind of warm it up, to take it back up a level, it's much more comfortable to reach out. And of course, the converse of sharing information easily is the ability to get information easily. I have a really large network, right? And on LinkedIn, what's great is I can spend 5 minutes in a day and go through the news feed, and that's all the information that my network has shared with me that they think is important. And what a great way for me to keep my pulse on what's happening with my network in minutes a day. So I think it's really, really important that you adopt some sort of program and adopt social media in some way, shape, or form. And again, it's all about a balance. I don't spend a lot of time on LinkedIn. And again, I write about LinkedIn. I train and teach and talk about it. And I spend at most 10 or 15 minutes a day on it. And it's actually a really big source of opportunity for me, for connections, for resources, opportunities to speak and coach. So it's powerful, and it's really high leverage. So I've gone through a number of the tactics. I said there's a lot more in the book. It was just a matter of time I wanted to dive into those and still have a few minutes left for question and answer. If you haven't had a chance to type anything in, I know we've been going quickly because there is so much information. Please feel free to take this time to go over that chat box, but I'm going to turn it over to Josh. Let me know what has come in, and if we don't have that many questions, I can still talk about some other ideas as well. But Josh, where are we at?
Dave, we've got a few questions here, so we're in good shape.
Perfect.
All right, first one out of the box here. What are a few examples of what you can give a new LinkedIn connection before you ask for help towards new employment opportunities?
Very good question. Especially if you're looking at somebody on LinkedIn. A couple of thoughts I would have. One is, this depends on kind of your comfort level and who the individual is that you've reached out to. I actually think it can be really powerful when you connect with somebody that you don't know in the offline world and you connect virtually. I think it can be valuable to reach out and say, hey, can we grab a 10 or 15-minute conversation? Nothing long. This is basically a virtual cup of coffee. And even in that 15 minutes, just to be able to put a voice to their name, you can have a pretty good conversation at that time. And maybe it's longer. Maybe it's like a half an hour if you have a lot of shared interests and whatnot. But what will happen in that conversation is you are going to find out about what they're working on, and that can be really powerful. I think one thing you can do is look at the status updates that they're posting, and even if you like, and again, don't do this inauthentically, right? Just don't do it to do it. But if you like something they've shared, say it, like it or comment on it, share it. We're all human beings, and we like it when people pay attention to us, and we like when people validate us. That's a lot of times people think, well, I have to be able to provide connections and opportunities and introductions. Sometimes just, again, validating a person, giving them positive feedback, so powerful. And it's a good way to start to build the bridge of the relationship. So I think that can be very easy. The other thing you can do is just share information. So, if you find an article that might be relevant to that connection, just share it. You could send it directly to them, or very specifically on LinkedIn and really most social media platforms. What's really nice is you could post a link to that article and then tag the individual, right? So if you just connected with, Bob, you could say, hey, Bob, I just found this article. I thought you might find it interesting. So there's just a couple ways of being able to provide value to your network, or to your networking connections, I should say, right from the very start.
All right, next question. Please share some techniques how to stay in touch with those in your network to keep them alive and well.
Awesome. So many different ways of doing it. I think there's a couple things. One, there's offline and there's online. So let me share kind of some ideas we can do with both. I think in the offline world, I think there is an opportunity for you to identify people that you'd like to stay uh, connected with, even though they're not like a really close friend. And I think it's valuable to kind of create maybe a list of, and the number is going to depend on you. It could be as low as 10, could be as high as like 50 people that you would like to stay connected with on some level in the offline world. I'll share with what I personally do is I actually just use Outlook, and I have a reminder pop up, usually every 3 to 6 months. Give this person a call, reach out and go have a cup of coffee with them. If depends on again on the person where they are and all of that. But so what happens is I get that reminder, I reach out. Sometimes it's just even sending an email. Hey, just want to check in. How are things going? And we have some sort of interaction, and then I put the reminder to remind me in another 3 months or another 4 months, whatever it might be. I can't use my brain to remember all that. I don't think anybody can. This is one of the places where that upper limit can cause a problem, that upper limit of 150 relationships. So use technology to help even with your offline connections. And I do think online, there's a couple things. The first is really to make sure that you are using whatever social media platforms you're on to post status updates. People ask me all the time, well, what if it's not relevant, or do people really care? And the answer is no, they don't always care, but that's okay. Just like I read my news feed and not everything that my network is sharing is relevant to me. I still see their name, I still see what they're talking about, and in a couple months, if what they're talking about is relevant, they've kind of planted that seed in my mind. So I think using social media platforms right now is a really powerful way of staying in touch. And then depending on what you are doing, if you've got your own company, you're an entrepreneur, if you're in sales, for sure this works. But again, you don't have to. I have a networking partner who he's a computer programmer, and what he does, and all of these professions can do, is send some sort of email newsletter, an e-newsletter out to the people who are in your network. Even if it's just once a quarter or just every couple months or every month, saying, hey, here's the things I'm working on. I just want to keep you in the know. By the way, here's some places that I could help. If there's any way that I can connect you with people, please let me know. Again, just a really simple way of staying in touch. It's really about finding some processes and systems to use so that you don't have to like reinvent the wheel every day.
Thanks, David. In the essence of time, I know we only have about 2 minutes left to the time period that we had allotted for this. So we will stick around and answer a couple additional questions here. But in essence of time, I know some folks have to get going. So David, can you jump to that next slide for me, if you don't mind?
Sure, and I will stick around afterwards. But for everybody, if you have to go, the one thing I wanted to end with, good networking is a long-term process. If you think about a farmer going out to their field and having this crop that they get to harvest, it all starts from little seeds, right, that they've planted. And when they planted those seeds, they didn't expect to come back the next day and have that beautiful, beautiful harvest. They cultivated it, they watered it, they took care of it, they spent time, energy, and attention to really grow that beautiful field. And in the same way, you need to make sure you're putting the time and energy and effort in. You might not see the results the next day, but I guarantee you that if you are spending that energy and time and attention and really giving your network the love, right, you're going to get it back tenfold. So I really encourage you to do that. So thank you for your time. Again, we'll stay on and answer some further questions. These are ways you can get in touch with me. Here's my email address, or see my site online at imdfish.com. And I know that, Josh, you can tell everybody about the next one coming up as well.
That's exactly it. Thank you so much, David. Appreciate it. And obviously make sure that you stick around. We have a few questions still here in the queue that we'll answer. For those of you that have to jump off, we will be continuing to record this. So these questions will be available on youtube.com/UConn alumni. But in the interim, our next webinar, if you enjoyed today's presentation, is geared towards those folks that are in the mid-career time or those that are creeping up on retirement, looking for something else that they can do with their careers. Many times we find our folks that are in for-profit industries jumping into the not-for-profit industry, all those different things. And Nancy Collimer is a national, similar to David, who's with us today, a national figure who speaks on these pieces. She's been keynote for a number of conferences across the country and for organizations of the sort. So I encourage you to jump online, register for this upcoming webinar, as well as other webinars that are coming down the line at uconnalumni.com/events. And moving forward, that's going to be on 10/6 at 12 p.m. Eastern time again. Moving forward, we'll answer a couple more questions that are here in the queue.
Sure.
David, what do you recommend in building one-on-one relationships as a small business owner?
Great question. I've been doing that for 10 years. I think one of the, and I've mentioned this briefly a few times, one of the big things, especially for small business owners, is spending some time to get to know kind of those, the next circle of connections. Like we have those, let's say 150 relationships we can manage pretty easily. It is about being very deliberate about kind of creating a dream team. And what I mean by that is looking for people that are usually other small business owners or service providers and spending time, like maybe once a quarter, connecting with them. I think this is a great place where the networking coffee comes in. I'll tell you, I've spent a lot of my life professionally in Starbucks and in local coffee houses, just spending about 45 minutes with somebody. I kind of call it professional dating, right? Because you're basically having lots of first dates with people. The great thing about professional dating is that you can actually date many, many people, and it's acceptable. But just having this time to connect with people in person can be really powerful. And the other thing is to go back to the idea, even as a small business owner, of being very, very clear about your niche, about who you help, about what you do. One of the ways of thinking about this is when your network shares what you do with other people. It's like the children's game telephone, where you sit in a circle and one person says a sentence and whispers it to the next person, and it keeps going around the whole circle, and eventually it's this completely different sentence because every person, it degrades a little bit when they share it. Well, it's going to be the same thing with your message. Every time you share something with your network, however they share it, it will degrade a bit. So the more clear you can be, the more effectively your network can share. So the more you can be like, hey, this is exactly what I do, this is what my business does, this is who I help, this is who I want to meet. So if you run into that person, please introduce us. That's really important. So those are some of the ideas I think that you can take into account when you're a small business owner.
Great. The next question is pertaining to a industry changer. If you are trying to change industries and have limited value directly related to the industry, how would you suggest you begin building a network? And subsequently, would you initially focus on meeting people and creating personal connections based on something unrelated to the industry, or directly focus on that industry?
Yeah, so both approaches work. If there's ever a way where you can find somebody in the industry who you have some other sort of connection with, I think that's awesome to leverage that. This, by the way, is a big advantage to alumni networks. If I want to search or move into a completely different field, if I want to all of a sudden become a actor in Hollywood, I don't know many of them. I know a few actually, but the reason I know them is because I know people from Northwestern. I went to school who were in the theater department and moved out there. So what I would do is I would go to my alumni network and really leverage that alumni connection with people who are in that industry. So in the same way, if you know somebody who's, a UConn alumni in the industry you want to, get into, it's absolutely a good idea to say, hey, I'd love to have a few minutes of your time. We're both UConn alumni. You're gonna find a lot to come out of that. The other thing I do suggest, if you're trying to get into an industry that you don't, that's new, is to actually reach out to people and ask them for their feedback or ask for advice. It sounds strange, but one of the things you can always kind of um, take for granted or don't take, it just happens, is that we all have egos. We all like people to want to listen to us. We all want to think that what we know and our experience has value. So if somebody calls you up and says, hey, I'm thinking of getting into your field. I know you've been in it for a while. You probably have some really good feedback or some thoughts on how to get started. Could I pick your brain for 20 minutes and get some ideas from you? You'd be surprised how many people will say yes, right? And by the way, don't necessarily call the CEO of the biggest company in that industry, because they might not have time. Kind of find people who may have 15, 20 minutes to talk to you, and you'd be surprised at how many people will say yes. And then at the end of those conversations, obviously say thank you. This is definitely where you send up a follow-up note or email, say thank you. But then you can ask, hey, do you know anybody else in this field that I should be talking to? And then they'll say, oh yeah, you should probably go talk to Frank over at this company. And then what's interesting is you've now been recommended to Frank, so it's a warm introduction, and so you're in to the industry, and you kind of keep building those relationships, because eventually you will be able to pay them back. Their networking karma, what goes around comes around. So in some ways, you're giving them a chance to pay it forward a little. So those are a couple ways of networking into a new industry.
You hit the nail on the head there. I was going to say the informational interview style of networking is truly a remarkable thing.
Mm-hmm.
Next question.
Absolutely.
Oh, sorry. Next question coming through is a two-parter. This person indicates that they've recently interviewed at a company, and they're curious as to how soon they should write a thank you letter, and should it be email or paper format?
Well, I will say there's a lot of people who are much more experts on the job seeking process and the interview process. So I'm just going to share my philosophy of what I would say. I think you do both, right? My mom did a good job raising me, making sure she beat the idea of thank you notes into my brain. But I do think that what you can do is send that email like the next day, and hey, it's just a quick, hey, thank you for your time, really appreciate it. If there's any other information that I can share with you for your decision-making process, please let me know. And at the same time, like that day or the next day, you pop something in the mail, just again, a quick, thank you for your time note, that's going to show up a day or two later. So you've got these nice kind of little, you get the touch of the interview, then the next day they get that email because they get it right away, and then 2 or 3 days later they're getting that physical piece of mail from you. So you've had 3 touches. I think that's the best way of doing it. So I would do both, and relatively soon.
All right. Next question comes through, specifically talking about building partnerships between folks that are in the business and corporate world, as well as those in the nonprofit, social workers, administrators, and the possibility of bringing those two types of connections together. Do you have any suggestions for networking and network building and sustaining this type of relationship?
So just so I'm clear, so the idea of sustaining relationships kind of between the organizational and the service providers, is
Correct.
That like kind of nonprofit?
Correct.
Yeah, what a great question, and really one of the biggest challenges, right, for many people in those sorts of industries and positions. I think that the advice I would give here is actually not necessarily tactical, but maybe philosophic. And one of the biggest opportunities, I think, for somebody to network or to be a good networker is to really keep in mind the perspective of the other person, right? So I think a lot of times people that are, let's say, again, more corporate or administrative, they have one set of issues and problems, and they're thinking about one set of business goals and issues. And then you might have the people who are out there providing services or kind of in the trench, so to speak, and they have a whole other host of issues. And we can be very short-sighted and think that the way that I view the world is the only way. And of course it doesn't really help engender better relationships. So one of the things I think where networking actually can come in, and we're just building relationships can come in, is the idea of how do we connect with other people and really try to understand what they're working on. Because if we can understand what the other person's problems are and what challenges they have, and they can understand what our challenges are, then you can actually find some fun ways of not putting the challenges together, but actually working on them concurrently. And again, that's where even more that idea of the professional world is. If we can combine different spheres of knowledge and influence, and that's really where kind of innovation comes in, that's where you get new solutions. And so that's I think the philosophic approach I would take. The tactical approach is actually just the same. It's staying in touch with these people, bring them into your follow program, reaching out if you don't know them, and starting relationships if necessary. But sometimes it takes a little effort to reach across the divide, so to speak, and it's absolutely worth it if you'll put that initial time in and build a relationship.
All right. Last question that we have at this point is specifically geared towards building connections and awareness for a specific organization this person is working with. Do you have any recommendations on how to build awareness or provide connection opportunities for nonprofit or spiritual type groups?
So how do you build awareness through networking? So I don't mean to continue to go back to this point, but I think it's really important, is that idea of planting a flag. So one of the challenges we have is that we live in our brains 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. So we make all these assumptions about what other people know based on the fact that we think about this all the time. So, if I said to you, well, I'm a coach, an author, and a speaker, and, I say these things knowing full well what they mean to me, I have to remember that you probably don't know anything about what that actually means. So in the same way, I see this happen a lot actually in the nonprofit world, where people who work with nonprofits and really cool organizations will just say, we help work on the issue of homelessness. And I go, okay, well, doing what? How? Like, what exactly? Where do you plug into this? Or, we look on building better mental health outcomes, and there's all this information packed in their minds that and I'm a smart guy, I just don't understand. So the more clarity you can have when you're reaching out to your network, when you're having a conversation, when somebody asks you, well, what does your organization do? What are your focus areas? What's your mission? What are you about? The more clarity you can bring, that's not just a buzzword, but hey, this is actually, how we dive in and help people. That allows your networking partners to actually wrap their brains around it. And that's really the biggest hurdle that I find most have. Beyond that, it's just a matter of reaching out and connecting with as many people as possible. And really, I think also looking for some disparate connections. It's very easy to be very parochial, and a lot of times, for example, nonprofit people hang around with nonprofit people, and that's okay because attorneys hang out with attorneys and musicians hang out with musicians. It's normal for us to hang out with people like ourselves. But if you can, again, reach out beyond your kind of limited sphere of influence, you can find some really cool opportunities in other spheres of influence if you reach out. So those are some of the ideas I would give for somebody who's really trying to build awareness, is actually make sure it's clear what they're trying to build awareness for.
All right, that wraps up our question time. I appreciate everybody sticking around for an extra 15 minutes. Looks like almost 40 people stuck around, so that's some great attentiveness right there. And before we conclude for today, a big thank you to David for his time today. We'll honor him as an honorary Husky for the day, and we thank him for his time. And even though you're over in the Big Ten, we still have some respect for that school. That's all purple and white out there. We can honor that. We thank you very much for taking the time to join us today. Folks, if you do have questions, please feel free to email David at dfish@rockstarconsulting.com, or you can find more information on his website. You will be receiving a follow-up survey, so please take a few moments to fill that out. It's about 7 questions, pretty quick and easy. And then lastly, you'll receive in that email as well information pertaining to all of today's information for webinar, how to access it via youtube.com/UConn Alumni, as well as direct access to David's website. So again, many thanks to David, many thanks to you all for joining us, and we will see you next week. David, thanks again.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Take care, everyone.